Good evening, everybody. My name is Mohit. I'm sure some of you are jet lagged. It's probably your bedtime by now, and most of you have spent your energy listening to an amazing set of talks today. Worry not. I'm here to sing you a lullaby on observability. It'll put you right to sleep. Before I do that, I want to address the elephant in the room. And you're probably not alone. It feels like there's a word for everything that we already did before that tends to compress things in one thing, and we're able to get a new word for a new generation, right? I mean, I did some Google foo. I tried to look around observability as a trend in terms of how often it's mentioned. And since 2004, that's what that graph looks like over there. There was a spike in observability in the beginning in 2004, and then sort of went down, and it's coming back up again. Most of it is not because of observability that we do in our systems, but because observability in engineering and other scientific disciplines. When you try to put observability and monitoring together, the graph looks altogether different, and it somehow feels that this terminology came into our parlance around 2016. So yes, fairly new. And I don't want to start a religious war on what it really means, so I wanted to set context for what it means for us for the next 45 minutes in this room. And if I were to sum it up, I would just say observability is a superset that includes monitoring, which has alerting as well. It has debugging, testing, insights, and a lot more other things. And the way I like to think about observability is, as an analogy, is thinking about the Hubble telescope. The sole job of the Hubble telescope is not to look for comets hurtling towards Earth trying to destroy humanity. That is one part of it. It also does other things that explain to scientists and astronomers what phenomena is there outside in the universe, and, pun intended, get a good understanding of the problem space. All right? So we start from there. The first hypothesis I have about observability is how it's measured. And in my opinion, it's always measured through the lens of the systems that we have in between. We might be measuring customers or the behavior or metrics related to them, but it's always through the lens of the system in between. And in the context of who is the observed and who is the observer, this is a relationship that happens. And you might say, Mohit, it's not only our job to maintain systems. It has to do with ensuring that they run properly, uptime is great. So that's none of my job about what the customer does. But then wouldn't every engineering team say the same? In fact, this is a classic recipe where customer service departments become different, and engineers have nothing to do with the actual customer themselves. So what I'd like to propose is we should not lose focus, or we should not focus solely on our application stack, but shift the focus towards the customer themselves. We have to continue doing what we're doing and then move on. To explain that particular phenomenon, I'm going to do one thing that most of you will probably enjoy, which is watch a video. It's high time. You're probably sleepy. So the goal here is twofold. Put a message across and measure if Stephen Fry and Hugh Glory can make you get up and get a good laugh out of you. It's 3 minutes long, so bear with me, but you'll get to know why I'm talking about this. And if it does not work, we'll find out.
Quite fat. Thin, really.
I'm afraid I have some bad news.
Just a moment, John. I promised Marjorie I'd mend this clock for her. I wonder if you'd mind giving me a hand.
What, big hand?
Little hand.
Anyway, listen to me, Thomas. I have some bad news.
Bad news?
It's Marjorie.
Marjorie?
She's had a fall.
Marjorie's had a fall?
I'm afraid so. She was out riding this morning on Thunderbolt, and she hadn't returned by the time Mrs. Memplaster arrived. It turns out she's had a fall.
Now, just a moment, John. Calm down. Marjorie's had a fall, you say?
Yes.
Off a horse?
Well, of course, off a horse.
Well, I don't see there's any of course off a horse about it. Girls nowadays are likely to fall off anything. Doesn't have to be a horse.
No, but in this case it was.
Could have been a chair, a table, a pianoforte, anything.
Yes, except in this case, she was riding a horse when it happened.
When she fell off?
Yes.
So you reasoned to yourself, Marjorie has fallen off a horse.
That's right. Thunderbolt.
Thunderbolt, you say?
Yes.
Well, Thunderbolt's a horse, all right.
Exactly.
Any damage?
Well, too soon to say. Cavendish is examining her now.
That old fool, what does he know about horses?
No, Cavendish is examining Marjorie.
Marjorie, is she ill?
No, she fell off a horse.
Well, you better fetch Cavendish.
I have, Thomas. It's in the drawing room.
Horses are pretty big, John.
I know they are.
You fall off one of them, anything can happen.
Well, quite.
Well, not anything.
No, not anything.
I mean, this clock isn't going to become Prime Minister just because someone's fallen off a horse. I didn't mean anything in that sense.
Well, absolutely, no. Anyway, Thomas, Cavendish is examining her now.
You said he was in the drawing room.
He is, examining Marjorie.
And where's Marjorie?
She's also in the drawing room.
So they're both in the drawing room?
Yes.
Oh, perhaps it's not such an old fool after all. How is she?
Well, too soon to say. Sounds like a hell of a fall.
Off the horse?
Yes.
Thunderbolt?
Yes.
Now, what the devil was Marjorie doing falling off Thunderbolt?
Oh, you know how Marjorie loves to ride, Thomas.
Marjorie was riding Thomas. I'm Thomas, John.
I know that.
Marjorie wasn't riding me. Your story's a bit twisted there, old fellow. You said she was riding Thunderbolt.
She was.
She was?
Yes.
But she's not any longer?
No, she fell off.
Good God.
I know.
Where is she?
She's in the drawing room.
Marjorie was riding Thunderbolt in the drawing room?
No. She fell off at Stratton Brook where the path separates. That young fellow Cottrell found her and carried her to the drawing room.
Stables would have been better, I'd have thought. What? Drawing room's no place for Thunderbolt.
No, Marjorie.
What do you mean?
Marjorie's in the drawing room.
With Thunderbolt?
No, Thunderbolt's in the stables.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
It's not all right, Thomas. I tell you, she's had a bad fall.
Is she hurt?
Well, it's too soon to say. Cavendish is with her now.
Cavendish? He's a doctor, isn't he?
Yes.
I wonder if he knows anything about clocks.
Long story short, there's a difference between hearing and listening. And this is not a sticker I had to take from the internet to paste on my deck. This is right there on my refrigerator. My wife put it on the fridge for me. I saw it, but I did not see it till the talk actually landed. I was like, okay, this might be a good use for that sticker. And it's extremely important for us to understand the nuance. And that was the second thing I was talking about. Anyway, let's start with app metrics, something that we are most comfortable with. They are an indicator into the health of our systems that we maintain and perhaps customer experience to a level. And out of these metrics, we are extremely obsessed by two kinds of numbers. The number of nines that we have and the 75th and the 95th percentiles we always talk about. These metrics are a comfort zone, so that's why they are furthest away from our users over here. Let's talk about availability first. Everyone measures availability in some form, be it 500 errors, or to a deeper level, success and failures within your microservice itself. However, that is just the tip of the proverbial iceberg inverted. And the reason is, there's a lot of more people who cannot connect to your service at all, which you should not know about. And perhaps your service assumes that customers need to have fast internet. And in fact, even more so, your users might be a small part of the total addressable market for your service itself. For a service like search, it has to be everybody who has access to the internet. They should be able to search. So it's a different context in general. Enter network error logging. So this is the first tool I would like to offer to you. It's a W3C draft specification that allows browsers to send side channel telemetry on the availability of your endpoint. It provides that classic interface of hotline when the dial tone systems for the phone are down. And one of the things that we've learned in the last 12 to 14 months of use is that we have gained a whole new understanding of what issues our customers face when they are trying to connect to us. We were oblivious to the fact that people had DNS resolution issues on a regular basis through some networks, or there were TCP connection issues through some endpoints. What that resulted in us was we understood the network space near our customers more appropriately. You can enable this today for your service. It is available through all Chromium-based browsers. Speed is next. We always try to focus on the higher percentiles for our performance, 75th and 95th. And if you think about it deeper, you realize that the 75th percentile is only focusing on the last 25% of your users. The 75%, we always assume have good experience. But that may not be the case. What we have noticed is that sometimes performance is fast because images might be missing. It is possible the experience that they're getting is something that is suboptimal, and that is why things are running fast. Our singular focus to speed can result in a bad experience for the user. So the goal is to make sure your observability systems look at all the distribution and not just like a single percentile metric that you're focused on singularly. So usability. There was a time when software development used to have usability as one of its core principles or a core pillar. You would go through studies and such. But in the time of our online services where we ship code multiple times a day, it is not possible to do something like that. It is also not possible to really put usability into a single number. So the question is, how do you debug usability issues? One of the things, as an example, we noticed was somebody complained on Reddit saying they were seeing weird purple ads. This was clearly not an experiment. We do not want people to see purple ads. We also were not having a live site issue of sorts where something were going down. So then what do we do about it? It's not something that we can reproduce as a developer really frequently, right? I mean, you're not seeing it. How do you capture this kind of a problem? And how do you know if it's happening for more people in the wild? So what if you could see what your users saw? This particular technique turned out to be a game changer for us because having anonymized usability data helped us construct session replays, and we were able to find out what goes on. Over here, in this case, you can see the user is moving the mouse around and is not able to look at what's happening, and then finally struggles and gets to the bottom of the page to click on a link. So we were able to identify a particular kind of behavior. The next was, how do you find out what really is happening? What if we had a tool that allowed us to do search criteria and look for usability using structured data where we say, hey, are ads present? Are the ads presented with background color that is not the default? And is it possible to see those numbers in some structured data? And we were able to. We also noticed that there was this green shield kind of a thing in this particular example that led us to believe something else was going on, and we found out that the root cause was some script from client-based system that was wreaking havoc on the customer experience, which we did not want to have done. The interesting part was we were able to find out how many customers were going through this. It was not just about reproing, it was actually about what kind of impact we are seeing. This is a tool called Clarity, that's on GitHub. It helps you measure usability at scale. It gives you anonymized data that can give you session replays, structured data, and behavioral analytics all in one package. And it allows you to understand what has so far been obfuscated in terms of usability for online systems. I personally think of it as RUM on steroids. I know RUM exists, but this is something different altogether. So if you're experienced with RUM, I would encourage you to look at this. All right, so we are going to go closer to the user. We were there at metrics, then we came to usability, feedback. And feedback is like, you go to a doctor, they first read the blood report and say, okay, metrics are looking fine or not fine. And then they ask you to lift your knee, lift your ankle, or whatever it is. They look at some usability metrics in general to see how your motion is. And then they will actually ask you, so how are you feeling today? Right? And this is what customer feedback is all about. Because at the end of the day, we are all human beings. We try to quantify everything, but humans actually deal with feelings and emotions more than anything else. What does bad feedback look like? This is not a great way to collect feedback at all. And by the way, this is a personal example that I just copied, pasted, something that has happened to me personally. And there are two problems here. The first is I was anchored to the number 10. So when you ask me for feedback, said on a scale of 1 to 10, I love a 10, so maybe I'll think about it that way. And the other was, it has actually now been tied to somebody's well-being. How will I be able to give honest feedback if I was truly dissatisfied with the service? So the lesson over here is feedback that is personally connected is not really beneficial when you're trying to understand your service and get a good idea from your customer. I'm sure you've seen this kind of feedback. Feedback is not the amount of heat you want in your chicken tikka masala, right? It's not 4 out of 5 because you like heat. It's not that. How can you ask somebody to quantify feelings and say, hey, how are you feeling about my product on a scale of 1 to 5? Like, that does not make sense. Ask human beings what they feel, and then, of course, quantify it on your data collection systems. Don't ask them to convert their feelings into a number and then present to yourself. That is extremely important. Something that could be better is this. By using structured data that is relevant to the experience that they're actually looking at right now. Is there a way to ask for feedback that has context and structure that users can select and give you something that is measurable? We call this asking for feedback in the moment of time. The attributes change based on what they're trying to give feedback about. There's a highlighted board that comes over, and you can actually give feedback on specific things. However, the best-in-class feedback systems extract sentiment from what the users provided. Customers will often use punctuation marks, interesting words to describe what they feel about and what is their state of mind when they were using that product. You can obviously convert that to a number at scale, but at least get words from them and then convert that so you have raw data as well. One of the things that have helped us, and we started off working with that, then modified a whole lot, is the Code NLP library from Stanford. It is extremely useful. In fact, go to that website later. It has a web interface. You can try something out and see how it measures sentiment. Very interesting to do that. Well, in summary, a good feedback system is context aware. It knows how to change things based on which page you are. It's accessible. It doesn't need to be hidden deep underneath 4 different hamburger menu options. And it needs to be proactive. And when I say proactive, I mean, if a person is trying to press F5 multiple times during the session or is going back and forth between 2 pages, is it possible to detect that behavior and proactively ask for feedback and say, hey, looks like you're having trouble. Can you tell us what's happening? That is another way of doing it. Last one, of course, that you've seen is capable of sentiment extraction. And actual last one is actionable. No feedback is useful if you can't take action on it. Taking action is hard, but it is doable. As long as you have the right telemetry pipelines in place and analysis, you can convert it to a metric that you can actually understand. All right, now we are totally out of our comfort zone. Till about feedback, we were looking at metrics, and everything was going fine. Now we are into this thing called insider programs. Congratulations, you get to deal with actual human beings on the planet when you're doing this. And it starts with our goal to engage, not extinguish our customers. Some people might understand what that really means. People want to be cool as well. Okay? We don't want this to be a world where it's us versus them. I think you must have felt it as well. When you're asked to participate in a conversation, there is more engagement and mental energy in that interaction. A classic example is how debates are held for political institutions and such, where if you ask a question, I don't even know if it's going to make any difference. The fact is that you felt engaged, and it led something, and it triggered off a different chain reaction altogether. So, in summary, people not working in tech can have cool ideas for the services that you work on as well. It is important to ask what worked and what did not. Work with your customers, not just for your customers. As an example, it goes beyond experimentation. One of the things that we as engineers realize is that we run experiments. Nothing is shipped unless it has stat sig, p-value should be higher. The problem with experimentation, in my opinion, is it's defensive in nature. We try to make sure min bar has to be met, and then as long as it moves the right metric, we are able to do the right thing. However, experiments cannot capture what actual users might be able to tell you. Sometimes when we have a rich experience like this, we never realized that people mentioned and said, I wish you could have X, Y, and Z on the page. It would just blow everything away out of the water. We were able to put those things in practice. Another example that I don't have a screenshot for is NFL scores. We had NFL scores come up for teams, and it was looking good. Experiments were running fine, great metrics, engagement is great. Our folks told us, I wish you displayed the score this way because that's how football lovers like it to be seen. And then it changed the paradigm altogether, and we were able to get a lot more customer satisfaction out of this entire experiment. Experiments are very objective. It is important to bring subjective feedback into your shipping cycles as well. To be clear, it's not dog food. I'm assuming everybody knows what dog food is. Okay, all right, okay. So dog fooding is different. Dog food is when you, as the producer, are the consumer as well. Insiders are just highly engaged consumers. For example, I'll defend that particular statement, which is you look at yourself and if you have a service that you work on, it's a subscription service. Highly likely that if you work for a subscription-based service, because you're an engineer on that team, you get it for free, right? So you work, you use that. You have never seen the payment portal in your life, how the payment works, how those nag emails work, and how those things work, right? Dog fooding is not going to expose you to those problems. Insider programs, before you make a change, is going to expose you to that. Experimentation is going to give you dollar amounts going up. It's not going to give you customer satisfaction rates. So you might use your own product, but you're not the target customer. Last stop for our engagement is listening tours, what we call zero distance to customers. Before I do that, I would like to know how many of you would love to see the data centers that your services operate in or actually have seen and are awed by the huge infrastructure that they operate in. I'm assuming it has to be everybody because we are fascinated with where our systems run, right? But if I were to ask you the same question, are you deeply engaged to find out actually where your users are and where they should be or what they do on a regular basis? And I'm guessing the answer is, yeah, I might be, but on the scale of interest, it's lower than data centers. There's another thing, though. We can also say that they're all around us, so why should we care, right? And this is where the problem is, the irony, our users are so near to us, yet so far, and we have to bridge that gap. One of the things that we do is have the customer meet the engineer. And this feeling is mutual. Customers, by the way, are not just data points on a revenue chart or on an engagement chart or a QPS chart or a request per second chart. And engineers are not basement Borgs out there doing the bidding of their master. There's a bit of impersonal touch that happens when you work on online services. When something goes down, God damn it, that thing just went away. You don't even realize there's human beings operating the service. And at the same time, you don't care. And this is stupid customers, they clicked on something wrong. They should have known about it. So what this does is when you actually meet people, your own customers, it creates a different vibe between them. They realize that it is important to talk to people, and it's okay for some things to go wrong, and they understand when things go wrong. Believe me, when you engage with your customers and hear negative feedback, extreme negative feedback, you build character. And you also build tolerance, and God knows how much tolerance we sorely need in today's society. So this builds it up really well. How does it help engineering? The listening tours. I have a story. One of the presidential candidates mentioned that, sorry Bing, no one uses you. And that triggered, like, yeah, maybe everything's just bots. But then when you go out to meet people in these listening tours, they realize that there's actually real humans who use your service despite whatever might be said in the media or in the society. It's important to have that real connection. Some people drive 150 miles just to be with you simply because you asked them to. You should try that once. Second is talking to fans helps you see what you're doing really well. We engineers need to get that kind of feeling as well. And you will be surprised, it's not the big ship features that you focus on that make them extremely happy. It's the small things that make them happier more than anything else. How do you know about things? Experiments may not be able to tell you. Meeting people face-to-face will tell you. The face-to-face feedback you get from people is second to none. All right. Last lap. Why this audience? Why this particular conference? And why you people? You all run telemetry platforms. This is where all the data is collected. You are the first line of help for your systems. You understand how they work. You also know the ground reality of all the systems that are in operation because you deploy them. You make code changes. You know how messed up they are. And at the same time, you are the only people who have a 30,000 feet view of the entire product in general because you know what it makes to go from a user's computer to the data center, through the stack, all included. That is why this is important from our job descriptions point of view. And I'm only adding to it. So it's something that you can be comfortable with. And as long as you work on overall product, this can really be helpful. Quick recap. This is the 5-point plan that I present to you for observability focus to keep it more aligned with customers. I want to say this is not an all or none game. You have to start somewhere, and you have to connect with your customers for the long-term benefit of your product or service. Thank you. Questions, let me know.
Thank you, Mohit. Time for questions and answers. If anyone has a question, just please approach to the microphone.
You get to go to your rooms early. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I have a question. How do you draw a line between customers that you care about and customers that you don't care about? Because typically in a backend world, you don't care about single user issues because there might probably something wrong with their side.
Okay.
And this from single user to like users of a single type of phone to users for a single small country, where is the distinction?
So if I understood it correctly, how do we differentiate between, or how do we prioritize things for customers we care about, customers we don't care about in a lot of ways? For us, there's only two kinds of customers. There's customers and there's bots. You will be surprised the amount of bot traffic any online service site. We receive half of our traffic sometimes is bot sometimes. And our job is to distinguish, are we actually giving a bot-like substandard experience to a user simply because they look like that? So our engineering system should be able to capture that and give them a good experience. On the other humans, the real users, there is no differentiation in terms of experience by design. And the reason is it can depend on a business, I would like to say. For us, this product's zero cost to switch over to anything else makes sure that we do not leave a single user behind. That's been our motto altogether. There's revenue, which is a separate orthogonal part altogether, and revenue is a long-term game, you know.
So a small follow-up question. Let's consider there are users that use, for example, Lynx browser, which is text-based browser, which doesn't support JavaScript, for example. I'm not sure, it probably does now. So you still care about those users?
Yes, we care. Whether we do the right thing for them or not is debatable. In fact, I know a bunch of things. Actually, one of the graphs had the slower networks distribution curve. And one of the things we do know is we don't do well with slower networks when something is like 48 kbps or something of that sort. How do you create an experience that does not depend on heavy JavaScript libraries to render the right experience for them is a problem for us and for everybody who wants to expand more. There are efforts going on, but this is where the business aspect tends to struggle with customer aspect. When you have dollars, which is a zero-sum game, you want to put them somewhere. Our heart is in the right place, and we want to do the right things, but priorities take over everything else.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mohit.
Thank you. Good night.